very much. Great seeing so many old friends and family members and new faces. I appreciate you coming out here and talk about my artworks. In America, one generally thinks of quilting as something created by women. In the South, during the times of slavery, quilting was used as a avenue for creative expression. In the mid-90s, my daughter Justine took me to a quilt exhibition at the Anacostia Museum in Washington, D.C. I was thrilled when I realized it was an exhibit of quilts created exclusively by men. It was a wonderful exhibit and an enlightening experience. A 17-year-old male slave created a quilt that took my breath away. I invite you to an exquisite exhibit of quilts created by African-American women and men via Carolyn Meslumi's book titled Spirit of the Cloth. I'd like to read to you a paragraph from the introduction. The American quilting tradition is centuries old, dating back to America's colonial period. The assumption that enslaved Africans arrived on these shores with nothing of their own often only refers to their lack of material possessions. African slaves brought with them wisdom, abilities, and certain skills, including techniques of applique, piecing, and embroidery. The Western peoples of Africa have been wearing fine silks and cotton, sewn and woven in elaborate patterns long before any European contact. The techniques of applique piecing and embroidery have been used for centuries. While there is no documentation of the three-layered bed quilts that we now construct, the Hausa people of Nigeria, Chad, and Sudan made pieced and quilted armors for riders and horses for protection during battle. And the applique banners of the old Dahomey are acknowledged as history preserved in fabric. The descendants of those taken from Africa and born into slavery used their needle skills to create decorative and utilitarian pieces for their masters as well as for themselves. There are exquisite examples of antique quilts in museums across the nation whose origins have been attributed to Southern women of European extraction. But if those quilts had voices, they might well speak of dark hands that manipulated tiny pieces of fabric with nearly invisible stitches. I created 5-story quilts between 1996 and 1998. What inspired me to create these quilts? Allow me to take you on an imaginary trip. First, visualize it's a warm, sunny afternoon in Sandy, Utah, a suburb of Salt Lake City. I'm sitting in the family room, gazing out the floor-to-ceiling windows, and Enya's CD in memory of trees is quietly playing in the background. As I look through the window, my eyes first focus upon the sunlight bouncing off a statue of St. Francis of Assisi, standing guard in front of a 5-foot rock wall which surrounds the steep hillside. Ground cover, creeping Susan is bursting forth from the crevices of the rocks. In another month, white and purple phlox flowers will adorn the rocks. As my gaze moves higher, I see a hillside covered with yellow coreopus, red poppies, and an assortment of wildflowers, and 2 groves of scrub oak trees. And look, there's a deer and 2 fawns prancing up the hillside to their nesting place. Finally, my eyes feast upon a cluster of snow-capped mountains against the background of a clear blue sky, and I am quilting. My love of trees, flowers, mountains, music, and of course family are what inspires me to create my story quilts. I believe that when we are receptive to nature's beauty, spiritual lessons such as gratitude come to us, and for the spontaneity of the creative process. When my twin sister Valerie and I were attending Western Michigan University, our parents would occasionally invite some African students to our home for Sunday dinner. There was one young man named Tony Asiro from Nigeria, whom our parents became especially fond of. He became like a brother to us. In 1996, I had an opportunity to travel to Edo State, Nigeria, to meet Tony's birth family. It was a great experience. I took lots of photographs, not realizing that I would later They would later inspire me to create story quilts. Some of the techniques that I use in creating my story quilts are pin weaving, applique, embroidery, photo transfers, and the use of dimensional objects. My quilting style is improvisational because I start with a basic concept and then build and expand upon that idea as the quilt progresses. For me, the exciting part of quilting is waking up in the middle of the night or early morning with new ideas. And the really fun part is coming up with creative ways to convey those ideas. This often requires long hours of handwork. However, I don't find the handwork monotonous or boring, because this is when I let my imagination wander, and I travel to afar and commune with our Heavenly Father. 4 of the story quilts that I've so far created have an African theme. The 2 quilts that have been on display in the library are called The Market Queen and ... is never done. The story quilt Market Queen pays tribute to African market ladies. Their hard work and finesse and haggling with customers are quite remarkable. Situated around the border of the quilt are a series of tiny photos. These are staged photographs of my Aunt Kareem, who was a market queen in her own right. For many years, she was a skilled buyer and seller of antiques and collectibles in Cass County, Michigan. This quilt is unique in that I added beadwork to the basket. Memories of women washing clothes in the River Niger, carrying produce on their heads, and the sounds of women pounding fufu early morning are what inspires me to create Is Never Done. I have fond memories of making this quilt while listening to African music. I vividly recall the joyous feelings the moment I completed the images of the women washing clothes in the River Niger. It was at that moment, I vividly recall, that the quilt came alive and I could feel the movement of the women. This story quilt has been my most challenging endeavor thus far. It was personally gratifying to capture in a colorful and lively way the constant movement of women from sunup to sundown. Now, if I can get 2 tall fellows to come and hold my quilt up, maybe Travis. Yeah. The motivation behind my first quilt, titled Wisdom of the Motherland, was the desire to creatively highlight some photographs of trees taken in the village of Guinea-Buri in Edo State, Nigeria. This quilt is comprised of 42 12-inch squares that have been pin woven with 1-inch strips of fabric and ribbon for cording. As I assembled the image of the tree using the pin woven frames, I was able to capture the coloring and shading by my choice of fabrics. The photos of the trees were transferred onto silk and then appliqued onto 12-inch frames, onto the 12-inch frames that are pin woven. I've added African beads, some of which are skull beads, which represent ancestors. I logged well over 1,000 hours in making this quilt. Over 90% of the quilt is hand sewn. Often I would say Jesus prayers with each stitch, particularly when I did the embroidery work. The embroidery work represents about a month's work, just plain embroidery. This quilt has a very spiritual essence to it. There are 5 verses from Proverbs 3 hand embroidered around the borders of the quilt. Initially, I knew that I wanted verses 5 and 6 at the top of the quilt. These verses were very special to me because when I was going through an emotional crisis, a favorite aunt of mine called and said, read Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6, chapter 3, 5 and 6. And I did, and I felt much better. And then for balance, I felt I needed more scriptures on the sides and the borders of the quilt. So I searched my Bible index for references to trees. Fortuitously, I was led to the same Proverbs 3. So I found verse 3:18, which says, "She is a tree of life to those who lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone that retaineth her." So I ended up selecting verses 13, 17, and 18, all of which speak about the virtues of wisdom. And I find it very special that the pronouns she is used to denote wisdom. I'd like to share with you some of the verses, Bible verses embroidered on the quilt. At the top, it says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding." Verses 3, 5. Next to that is, "In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." Along the side, left side, "Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and he that gaineth understanding." On the right, it says, "Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and her paths are peace." At the bottom, "She is a tree of life to those who lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone that retaineth her." Now, this quilt is unique in that it's a two-sided quilt, so if you can just grab the bottom of the quilt and turn it around. Yeah, just hold it up. These are 5 folk proverbs, which I found to be very profound. And I can't recall where I came across these, but I read them all in one book. So I would like to remember the name of the book, but I can't. But however, I'd like to share them with you. The first one is called Propositions. It says, "All things which make noise at the side of the path do not come down the path." And that's an African proverb. The next one is Reunion. "Return to old watering holes for more than water. Old friends and dreams are there to meet you." Another African proverb. In the red, on the right side there, it's called Revival. "The remedy for dirt is soap and water. The remedy for dying is living." It's a Chinese proverb. And at the bottom in black, its title is Dead. "Death is a black camel that lies down at every door. Sooner or later, you must ride the camel." And I'd like to end with another quote from Carolyn Masrumi's book. She says that African Americans maintain a spiritual connection to home is evident in much of our creative expression. I'd like to just point out the book here on the left is called The Music Maker. This is a tribute to my nephew, Dr. Michael Walden. And I did this in 1996 for an art exhibit. And the focus of the exhibit was hands, but it shows all of he does as a composer, producer, and drummer. He started out drumming when he was in his late teens, early 20s. Here's a picture of him drumming when he was performing with Mahavishnu Orchestra. And he's won 3 Grammys so far and 1 Emmy and several ASCAP awards. But this is the collage of his Grammys. So there's not, probably a month goes by when I don't hear some of his work on the airways. So that's why I titled it The Music Maker. Thank you.
One thing I forgot to mention, several of her quilts have been exhibited in galleries around Salt Lake City area. She's always been very creative ever since she was a young adult. She's done amazing things with textiles and fabrics. presenter is Betty Walden. And Betty is a retired school teacher for the Kalamazoo Public Schools, where she taught at Hillside. Hillside Middle School for many years. And she's going to be talking about her quilts. Betty's been creating quilts for many years, and she's done a lot of work with the youth quilts in the Kalamazoo area. And teaching them how to quilt. Welcome, Betty.
I guess because I was a teacher once upon a time, I still keep a notebook. And I would encourage anybody who is interested in quilting or anything to do with it, that you do that. Because when you're sitting there, unlike Vicki looking out at everything beautiful, and your mind is just nowhere, there's little quilts. You get ideas and ways to do things. I've never been particularly creative, but I do like using bits and pieces. So most of my quilting, rarely do I go out and buy fabric and cut it up and restyle it. Instead, I use bits and pieces. Elizabeth McCracken gave me lots of pieces. And I've made quilts out of just pieces. And I've combined techniques where the embroidery is there and the fabric looks like the animal. It's not painted or anything, particularly the, what is this, giraffe. The eye was right where an eye should have been. So it was neat. So when making a quilt for my granddaughter, it was nice to find fabric, to look particularly for fabric, to get a lion that has a mane and a tail, but it's the fabric. So that's been my creativity, trying to piece the fabric with whatever I was doing. For a long time, like I said, I recycled. Every man I knew, got any neckties you don't want? And it was the same thing, thank you, sir. It was the same thing as just telling them, you know, and they were like, well, what did you do with them? I said, I put it in a quilt. Well, what did you do? And it's take the block, much like Vicki did. You can put it down if you look putting it on, what do you call it? The square, the foundation, putting it on a foundation. But I put the neckties through the laundry so I knew they would go through the laundry as it was in a quilt. So while the necktie was whole, I put it through the laundry and the dryer, and I knew it was okay. Some of them don't make it, and they shred up. But this was nice to do that. Oh, you guys are so nice. And I don't usually wash fabric before, because I've got pieces. I know it's going to work. I use old things. In this case, the things that I love from, no. They look good, but they're not too smart. This is like related to the piano key kind of order. The pieces all the way around are pieces left from different, these are, you sleep on it at night, pillowcases, the dresser scarves that, you know, were my mom's years ago, things that I kept, but I wasn't using them, so I thought, put it in a quilt, and then I'll see it. And because there were so many of them, the quilt got long. I guess it could have been wider, but it's fine. And it has the embroidery. So this is my ode to the old ladies who did all this work. And then I put the bright colors, tie-dyed fabric, mixed it in with it so that it made it more interesting, where the top of the pillowcase and the back of the pillowcase, there's still space to make my blocks. So I filled in that space with fabric. Hold it up, put it on the table. And so that's the kind of thing that makes my day. See, how can I use this, get it out where I will see it, and enjoy it so that my kids and whoever will know some of the history. Okay, this one is fun. The red is at the top. Okay. Look at the back of this first. I love the back of this. I don't know why, but I love the back of it. I only had enough fabric to go across my blocks, and I had this piece, and the designs match the figures. And I just said, you know, this is another, most of my quilts are reversible. You can use them on either side. This is one made mostly from scraps, and it's the Art of the Rainbow. If you can see, the red, and then the yellow, what is it, Roy G, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, green, Roy G, green, indigo and violet. Well, I can't make, you know. And they're all there. And then at the bottom, I kind of put, you know, it's dirty down there, so I put my browns and blacks down there. And this one, just walk through the people. This one has decorative stitching. Oh, no, it's good. Come on, Mom. The stitching is on, spread out, hold it out. That's right, they don't have to see it the right side up. But the decorative stitching is the opposite color in the color wheel. So if it's purple, it's stitched in yellow. And then I use various decorative stitches. Go back to the front. This side, so you can. Now we can come out and see it afterward. They're doing this. Okay, we can go back right there. Is this boring? No. You can't be boring. Trust me. Okay. No, this one doesn't matter. This one is important. This one is leftover pants. Little kids, women's pants, blue jeans. And it's all bits and pieces, cutting it up and putting it in a block. And I just make it up as I go. I made this for my grandson, and the back of it is an old flannel sheet, so it was real comfortable. Everything. I mean, I can't throw anything away. The bits and pieces I keep, you would be amazed. Even the batting, I even keep the batting. Okay, this is it. This is timely. This is a young man's life. James started out in the Kalamazoo public schools, and it goes all the way up to his graduation last year. So this is a T-shirt quilt that tells the story of things that he did during his school career. Again, finding fabric that fits in. Stars and stripes for the two guys on here that seem to be doing politics all the time, or did in one case. Basketball, things that he was involved in. And it's all mashed in there. And I'm going to show you another one that my granddaughter is doing after seeing this. She decided at 13 she wanted to do one, but it's very different. This one tells the whole story, where hers is only telling 3 years. So the quilt is very different. Grandmother, you should probably acknowledge this. Where are you? There she is. She's in the Kalamazoo Public Schools too. Sheila, I was going to say Sheila Hood. Sheila Miles. This is her grandson's quilt. Okay. Oh, Sheila, yes. The lady has suggested you should send a picture of that, and the back of that is interesting to me too. Send a picture of the front of that to President Obama. Yeah. so he could see. And he was here, for my grandson was in the graduating class that graduated when he came to speak. Okay, now this is my granddaughter's, and I show you this just to see it's very different. She chose the fabrics that she wanted. She put roosters up here because I collect roosters. So she said, Granny, I want that in there because it reminds me of you. I said, this is supposed to be about you. But it's still colorful, and we've used the back of t-shirts. So if you didn't have enough to go ahead and make, but again, I think it's a great thing to do for a grandchild or a child or working with kids. It's something that's personal to them, and yet they end up with a finished product that they can enjoy for years to come. But I'm very proud of her because she has cut and sewn every stitch of this. And at 13 years old, I was not doing much of that. I hope you guys are married. You make some woman. See how nicely they fold. Okay, this is one where I collected fabric. This is all wool. Wow. Oh, it's all wool that has gone through the laundry, so it's felted. And then the flowers were cut out and then embroidered, you know, to look like how they look. But that's one that is not done. I've not put the back on it yet, but I thought it would be interesting to see. I love it. I mean, it's like, oh wow, this is when I was a kid and you learn to embroider and do it this way and do it that way. So that was really a great joy. Okay, well thank you for listening to me. Use what you got to get what you want. This is the whole thing. Don't hide it away, you know. And in borrowing back things, Mrs. Miles was going to charge me because I wanted to borrow the quilt back to show it today. I didn't think that was fair. But the thing is, sometimes you have to go back to show people what you're doing. But I hope it lets you know, encourage the young people particularly, when you move about. I have a couple of things up here that show students. In the beginning of the year, we'd start collecting blue jeans and corduroy or whatever, and by the end of the school year, they would go home with a quilt. This particular child had bunk beds, and he made two, one in his 7th grade year and one in the 8th grade year, so that he had 2 quilts that he made in his classroom, or in his bedroom. His classroom, we didn't do beds. But I've enjoyed, it always feels good to share with people that have an interest, and quilt.